President Trump's health secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is reportedly planning to ban pharmaceutical ads on television. Kennedy has been a longtime critic of the promotion of drugs on TV, and others high up in President Trump's cabinet have agreed in recent months. Up until the mid-1980s, pharmaceutical companies gave information about their products only to doctors and pharmacists. But later that decade, some drug companies began giving the general public more direct access to the information, leading to the advertising that we're seeing on our television screens today. TV remains the industry's primary advertising format, and the U.S. is one of the few countries that allows prescription drugs to be promoted on television. But can Kennedy really ban pharmaceutical ads from TV? And what about the First Amendment and that protection of freedom of speech? Let's bring in Danny Karon, attorney, law professor, and author, a friend to Fox as well. Thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I do want to start with how exactly this whole process would work, going about banning these ads from television. Is this something that would need congressional approval, or can President Trump do an executive order?
Well, there are three ways you could try to push it through. One is through Congress in the form of a traditional statute requires the approval of both chambers. President signs it, but boy, will there be a lot of pushback on that. That'll probably never go through. Too many moving parts there. Options 2 and 3 would be an executive order, as we've seen a lot of lately, or a regulation from a regulatory agency like the Department of Health and Human Services. Those are options 2 and 3, more likely the ones that he's going to trigger to try to get this through more quickly.
I think a big part of this is that First Amendment piece, and I think that that's going to really dictate here an argument against this. So could this be that this can't really happen because of that freedom of speech?
Right. What we just talked about is really step one, the process part, the procedural part. How's he going to get it through? If that even works, that is, because that's going to get challenged in any event. But if it gets through, the second part, the substantive consideration, is really the First Amendment. Now, we think of the First Amendment in the context of political speech and how that's protected, except for, extraordinary circumstances like obscenity, defamation, fighting words, and so on. But the First Amendment also protects commercial speech, but not as robustly. There's a different test as it concerns the First Amendment's protection of commercial speech, and it derives from a 1980 case from the U.S. Supreme Court, Central Hudson Gas. And there, the court set out 3 steps, really a 3-part test for whether commercial speech is protected or not. First, there's got to be a substantial governmental interest in the ban. And RFK Jr. would argue, yes, there's a substantial interest here. These ads are harming consumers. They're making them spend money. They're giving them these delusional thoughts of cure. It's not good for the public. That's probably legitimate. That's probably good for step 1. Step 2, the regulation has to directly advance that substantial interest. Getting rid of the ads would do that. That's pretty easy too. It's 3. It's the third prong that's going to get really dicey here. And that's where the regulation must not be broader than necessary to effectuate that interest. And that's where the drug companies are going to crack down. They're going to say, hey, listen, you could do something else. Hey, listen, we could issue warnings. Hey, listen, you don't have to attack the full array of pharmaceuticals available. That's where things are going to break down. And that's probably where it's going to fail on First Amendment grounds.
I feel like you've done such a good job of breaking this down for us, the steps to lead to this to happen. But I do want to go off of what you just said, and that's these pharmaceutical companies, right? Because how likely is it that they would challenge this ban in court? And you touched on this a little bit, but can we further explore on what grounds they could base their arguments?
They will argue on both grounds. Procedural, as in the mechanism doesn't exist for you to do this. The statute's unconstitutional. The executive order is not okay, such as, for instance, Perkins Coie in the law firm executive orders. They're pushing back on that basis. They're not accepting the executive order. Or the regulation isn't okay out of HHS. They'll fight there. If they lose there, they'll fight on the substance, on the First Amendment bases, in the manner I just described, channeled through the 3-part test from Central Hudson Gas. It's going to be a big, long, ugly, tough, expensive fight, and the pharmaceutical companies will not stop short of victory. That's their agenda. And they did this during Trump 1, when he tried to push through a directive that said, hey, drug companies, you've got to advertise when your costs are more than $35 per dose or per script. They pushed back and they won. They'll do it again here. They'll fight really hard.
Would this be something that can only be implemented at a federal level, or could individual states enact similar bans? Because we've seen President Trump saying in certain instances he wants the decisions to be back with the states. So is that something that we could see here play out as well?
Well, the FDA really is in charge of this space, but the states have a little bit of wiggle room too. I mean, they can regulate things such as disclosures that, come across the screen, the number of ads that come across, folks' TVs. And Oklahoma and Connecticut, believe it or not, already have bills introduced to do just that. They're trying to take this to the state level, and whether this will become a state undertaking in keeping with sending the rights back to the states because of what's happening here and what Oklahoma and Connecticut have initiated, who knows? It could be a whole new world order. We don't know.
Another big question mark here is, this is targeting television ads, but we're in this whole new world of streaming and social media, and there's advertising on there as well. Could that be a next step, or is that going to be included in this television realm?
Well, right now, JFK Jr. is pushing TV. He could pivot to streaming. And when he does, believe me, the drug companies will be right there keeping pace with him because they will do anything they can to keep their billions and billions of dollars coming in on account of encouraging folks to over-medicate. And the TV stations, especially, maybe not so much streaming, make a ton of ad revenue over this too. They want this too. There are going to be a lot of fights in a lot of different directions when this really takes root.
Timeline wise, really, how long would something like this take from the introduction of this to really getting those ads off the screen? How long of a fight is this going to be?
It's anybody's guess. I've stopped reading tea leaves and predicting how quickly courts will act. I've got cases that have resolved in a year. I just resolved one that has been in suit for 9 years. Will it take that long? Far from it. There's an urgency to this, but will it be immediate? I doubt it. The drug companies will want it to be. The government might want to stretch it out and try every angle they can to get this through. And there are going to be a lot of fights and a lot of clever lawyering to ensure victory for whomever. And how it resolves, it's anybody's guess.